tell you something interesting. At least I found it interesting. Is that the last time we went through Tanya, it was a little bit different style of a class. We weren't reading every word inside. But when we came to chapter 7, we did chapters 7 and 8 together in one class. So we had one class where we condensed 7 and 8. And I put them together and basically said, these are the classes about klipot, and why prolong it? Why speak about klipot longer than necessary? It's interesting because today we're starting our third class just in chapter 7. So we went from last time putting 7 and 8 both into one chapter to chapter 7 itself on its own, taking three lessons. So just to review, we were talking about klipas noiga, about what literally translated klipas noiga means the luminescent or the shiny husk. It's shining because you can see the godly spark within it that can be accessed. And what we're really describing is everything mundane that can be channeled to some type of godly purpose. Okay. So we spoke about when that opportunity is squandered and when we engage in mundane things without any intent for the sake of heaven, and how it actually causes the experience to become lower than neutral, and how it becomes animalistic. And I think that's basically where we left off. Yeah, is that where we left off?
I wasn't listening.
Oh, and we spoke about the terms asur and mutter. That was an important concept. Yeah. Asur and mutter. Yeah. Tied down and untied.
Right.
So the things.
We went to relationships. Better relationships.
Right. We spoke about food. We spoke about relationships.
Right.
There are things that can be
Getting
elevated.
sticky that we didn't learn in Meisifka.
That's right. This we could call this whole Tanya share that what you didn't learn in Beis Rivka. Okay. Okay. All right. So we said, yeah. So just to back up, and the last line that we read, we said when something is asur, forbidden, it's tied down. Remember, we gave that whole long mashal about, is it tied down because it's forbidden, or is it forbidden because it's tied down? And it caused a little bit of confusion, but just for the sake of hopefully confusing you more, we concluded that it is not tied down because it's forbidden because it's tied down. In other words, it is intrinsically tied down. It's intrinsically useless. It can't be elevated. Therefore, Hashem saves you the heartbreak and the wasted time and energy and resources and tells you, sweetheart, leave it alone, walk on by. Okay? So we said these things that are asur, that are forbidden, and therefore what we know about them is that they are intrinsically not able to be elevated, that they're gonna just sit there until Hashem will remove the spirit of impurity from the world. As Ruach Hatuma Avim in Haaretz, Hashem says, I will remove the spirit of impurity from the world. We will not be able to do it. We can only elevate the mundane, but we can't elevate that which is off limits. Okay. So that's where we left off. Yeah. Yeah.
The example that we used last week was if you ate something non-kosher.
Yeah.
Because of pukra nefesh, and you had to save it up, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So in that case, what you ate did not become elevated, correct?
Right. So we did have a little bit of a discussion last week at the end of class where we were asking, just to refresh people's memory, what's the status of food that was consumed to save a life? Unkosher food, non-kosher food that was consumed in order to save a life. Yeah. So, it's a little bit complicated, but let's simplify it by saying, in that case, it is not usser.
Not asa, but the food, the actual food that you ate does not become elevated.
I don't know how.
I mean, it saved your life,
Yeah.
but it didn't save your life. That's all there was.
Yeah. So, in an indirect way, it is elevated. And by the way, these concepts are not as simple as we present them. I mean, elsewhere in Chassidus it talks about, you can't eat a horse, but you could ride a horse to go do a mitzvah. So it's not quite so simple, but for our purposes here, and again, remember that Likutei Amorim, the first volume of Tanya, its job is not to explain exhaustively all of these mystical concepts. It's here to give us enough information that we can navigate our own personal growth. So a lot of these concepts are not developed here in Tanya fully. They're developed in other places in Chassidus. So the question of the status of forbidden food that becomes permissible in a pikuach nefesh, in a life-saving context, it's a little bit not so straightforward. And we can get into that discussion, but I want to focus on the next thing he speaks about, because it is very, very important. In fact, I might even say it's probably the most important question in terms of understanding our relationship with the forbidden. And that is, after the fact, retroactively, is there any way to redeem that which is technically irredeemable? So I want to focus on this idea here. The last thing we said, as I said, but I'll repeat again, is that there are certain things that are just irredeemable. That's what's called usser, halachically forbidden, literally tied down, and we can't deal with it. At the end of time, Hashem will come in, he'll clean up that which we could not clean up. Fine. Now, the next line, he says, oi, or, alternatively. He just said there's stuff that's irredeemable. There's no way to elevate it. Only Hashem will come and clean it up when Mashiach comes. Or another possibility, ad sheyasa teshuvah g'dayla kol kach, he does teshuvah that is so great. How do we translate teshuvah? Penitence. But really it's return. Returns to Hashem in such a great manner, shezdainus nasalei kazachias mamish, that his sins, there are different words in the Holy Tongue for sin. Zdainis is probably the worst word for sin. It means wanton sins, purposeful sins. Sometimes you made a mistake. Zdainis are not mistakes. Zdainis mean, I knew what I was doing. I did it out of spite. It's the worst kind of sin. Yeah, what?
Out of spite.
Yeah, the worst type of sin. And even those sins can become merits. Now, what does this mean, that the worst kind of sins can become merits? I understand that it gets expunged from the record. It won't be held against you. I understand that it can be that the negativity could be overlooked or even wiped away. But to say the negativity can become positive, how does that work? And that is what he's saying. So how does that work? So in other words, we've been discussing the prospect of Gimel Klipos Atameus, the irredeemable, utterly unclean klipos. And we said, sort of categorically, hey, the definition of them is that they're irredeemable. So if you get involved with them, nothing good's going to ever come of it. But then we said this big asterisk, like, oh, hold on, though, there's one caveat. Yeah, retroactively, there is such a thing where there's a teshuvah, not a regular teshuvah, but a really big teshuvah that could go and redeem the irredeemable. And turn the negative into positive, to turn the wanton sin into an actual spiritual plus. Okay? So this is what we're discussing now. How does that happen? Okay, let's continue. Shehi teshuvah mi'ava. First of all, as he begins to define this teshuvah, he says it's a teshuvah me'ava. It's a teshuvah that comes out of love. As opposed to what? Fear. Obviously, there are different motivations for teshuvah. But the two general motivations would be, and the two general emotions, like we spoke about in chapter 3, the two general emotional axes, the right and the left, love and awe. So the two general motivations for teshuvah would either be out of love, a desire to come closer to Hashem, or out of fear. Fear of punishment, fear of judgment, ultimately the deepest fear of separation. But here we're talking about the teshuvah that comes from love, a desire to become close to Hashem, or to get closer to Hashem. Mu'um kedeliba, from the depths of his heart. Bi'aver rabba, with abundant love. V'chshika, and yearning, pining. V'nefesh sheikeka, and a soul that is longing ladavke be'yisbarach, to cleave to Hashem. So the motivation for the teshuvah is, I want to get closer to Hashem. I'm yearning to get close to Hashem. This thing, this blot on my record, this is a separation. This is keeping me away from Hashem. I don't want to have it intercede between me and Hashem. And so my incredible love for Hashem is causing me now to reassess my feelings about this sin. What happens here? It's a remarkable concept. Obviously, I did teshuvah. I'm not going to sin again. I'm done with that. Not only I won't do it again, I regret that I ever did it. Right? Because you could say, I won't do it again, but I'm glad I know what it's like. This is, no, I wish I never did it. But it's even deeper than that. I wish I never did it. And I'm in pain right now about the fact that this past experience is coming between me and Hashem.
Is it pain or guilt?
Not guilt, pain.
Pain?
I want to be close to Hashem. And I know that I did something that rejected that relationship. I told Hashem, get lost. Even if it was for 1 second. I told Hashem, hey, get out of my life for a second. I got to do what I want to do. Well, I hate that. I hate that I have that in my history. I hate that I have that in my story. Not because of guilt, because that moment represents a moment of separation, a moment of rejecting the relationship, and I want to be completely close to Hashem. So now, how do I feel about that spiritual failure, that moment of spiritual failure? How do I feel about it? Well, I feel like it's It's a threat to my present closeness with Hashem. And when I think about it, it instills me with a feeling of a need to push to get closer to Hashem. And therefore, here's the pertinent idea. The practical effect, like the bottom line, what is the sin? You have to be very careful here, because we're not justifying the sin, we're not glorifying the sin, but we're saying right now at this moment, in the present, what effect is this sin having on me? The practical effect is it's actually spurring me on to desire closeness with Hashem even more than had I not had that experience. So was it a positive experience or a negative experience? Well, it was a negative experience, but
Cause you to become closer to Hashem.
but it causes me, well, it doesn't directly cause me to come close to Hashem, but it causes me to feel a greater desire
Okay.
or a more intense desire to fight that, overcome it, and come closer to Hashem. And the way he describes it is thirst. He calls it thirst. If we continue here inside, V'tzama nafshe l'Hashem ke'eretz hayefa v'tziyah. It's like a person in a parched desert who's thirsting. His soul is thirsting for Hashem.
Can anyone have that experience, or does someone need to first have a closeness with Hashem, then they sin, so they yearn to go back to that?
You're asking if there are prerequisites on this, like only certain people could even have this experience?
How does someone know they want that experience? Have we all had that experience?
To some degree, yeah. I mean, look, he's describing a category here. He's talking about not just a regular teshuvah. He calls it a great teshuvah. So there are two ways I could teach this. One way I could say is this is describing something that you've never experienced. Maybe someday you'll experience it. The other way I could teach is I could say it's on a continuum, and great is a qualitative word, and as good is besser nicht besser. You know, it's. I prefer to teach it the latter way. So instead of saying, I don't know, this is some type of a category that we're going to learn about but not necessarily relate to, let's learn it like this. We all know what it means that a moment of failure becomes a motivation for greater success. We all know what that means. So that in the end analysis, you look back and you say, well, was that a net gain? I mean, at the moment, it was a loss. But in the big picture, it was productive. So I think we can all relate to that experience. Yeah.
I kind of feel like, that if a person was never made aware of Hashem's intense love for us, then they're not going to feel like, there's some people who really don't feel like Hashem cares about them.
Yeah.
Or loves them, so therefore they might feel like, okay, I sin, but I don't have that love, like I don't feel that love, therefore
Right.
they're not going to be able to feel this great sense of yours.
So you may, yeah.
Out of our conditioning, which is really guilt.
Okay, so you're making a very valid point, which is that if somebody's understanding of teshuvah is guilt-based, they may not end up coming to this kind of teshuvah.
Yeah.
Now, yeah,
Unfortunately, that's how the system
I would agree with that. So
Not this.
so it's important that we're learning this.
Right.
It's important that we're learning this. And it's important to understand that there are different types of teshuvah. And like you say, if a person doesn't feel that the relationship with Hashem is based on love, then where would they even get the idea that they should return to Hashem out of love? Yeah, from a context of love.
Isn't the notion of real teshuvah, the fact that you understand you've done something wrong, you've given another opportunity to do the same thing, you don't do it, and because of your love for Hashem, and then you move on. That's the only way that you could really be forgiven, no?
No, you can be forgiven even if you don't do tshuva out of love. See, that's the point. Let's go back. Let's repeat this. Zdainis nasale kazachias. The negative occurrence, the moment of sin, not only is expunged, erased, canceled out. That you could do with regular tshuva. No, it gets repurposed and transformed into an asset, into something positive. Because remember the context. We're speaking about here how to redeem the irredeemable. So we said you can't. That's the whole purpose. I mean, that's the whole meaning of irredeemable. Irredeemable means what part of irredeemable did you not understand? Irredeemable means it's irredeemable. It's done. It's done. You cannot redeem this. If Hashem says that this is asur means tied down. That's it. There's nothing can be done with it. Except after the fact, and you can't engineer this, and you can't do it on purpose. And kol mi she'omer echdeva ashuv, anyone who says I'll purposely sin and then do tshuva, it won't work for him. But after the fact, now he fell into that which is irredeemable. If it so happens that his feelings about that relationship with the irredeemable becomes a driving motivation to have an intense relationship, an intense and loving relationship with Hashem today, well then, after the fact, was it a net gain or a net loss? It was a net gain.
Because it spurs you on to do.
Because it spurs you on. So he calls it thirst. He calls it thirst. He says like a person in a parched desert who feels thirsty. Let's continue. Yeah?
I apologize, I'm still not clear. Does everyone have the opportunity to have that thirst?
Yes.
Where do we get it from? Have we all
From your soul.
Okay. So our soul knows a loving relationship with Hashem.
Yeah, but at the same time, we got to talk about it, so your brain should know about it too. Okay? What makes you able to love Hashem? Your soul. It's embedded in you. It's your hardwiring. What increases the odds that you'll actually act on that? Your education. The fact that you were told that it's possible. Okay? There's musical talent, and then there's music lessons. So the fact that you come to this class already with a neshama, you already have the ability for tshuva ma'ava. But the fact that we're talking about it increases the likelihood that you'll actually do that. Two things. Okay. So he describes it as a thirst. Liyes ki adheina hoysa nafshei be'eretz tzia v'tzalmavis. Continuing the metaphor. Until now, his soul had been in a parched desert, a land of death, spiritually. Hiya sitra achra, which means the other side, which we defined in chapter 6 as anything that's not for the sake of Hashem. Urechaike ma'er pnei Hashem b'tachlis, utterly distant from the light of Hashem's face. So the sin is being distant, putting oneself into a position of being distant from Hashem, removing oneself from the light of Hashem. And now his soul is thirsting for Hashem with greater intensity than the souls of the tzaddikim. So ostensibly a tzaddik has a great desire for Hashem. I mean, we haven't really defined tzaddik yet. We'll define tzaddik in chapter 10. But we spoke a little bit about tzaddikim in chapter 1, but we didn't really explain who they are. But we know they're a pretty big deal. So ostensibly a tzaddik has a great desire for Hashem. And what we're saying here is that the person who was in a spiritual desert and becomes aware of the fact they're in a desert and they're thirsting for reconnection with Hashem, their desire for closeness with Hashem becomes more powerful than even that desire for closeness with Hashem that is felt by the tzaddikim. So then you have to ask yourself a question. Again, I mean, I'm repeating the same point over and over, but what was the effect of the sin? You take that sin out of his story. Of course, if you would ask him, do you wish it never happened? Yeah, I wish it never happened. I hate it. I hate that it happened. Okay, we're going to take it out of your story. It never happened.
There's no parched desert.
But now there's no parched desert. There's no thirst. Now you don't have that intense longing, that desire. So it's this irony. It's this catch-22. I wish that it never happened, but in a certain way, it's the greatest thing that happened to my relationship with Hashem, because the net effect is that's what's spurring me on to desire with such intensity to be close to Hashem.
Is that the same thing as pain in this world?
Well, it's a very specific kind of pain. It's not just any pain.
Pain of remorse.
But any pain that spurs you to connect.
It's not any pain. It's a very specific pain. It's the pain of feeling.
Remorse.
It's not just remorse, because you could do that without love. You could have remorse without love. It is specific. It's not just regret. No. It is specifically the pain of separation from my beloved. So love means a desire for closeness. If we could simplify, what is love? Love is a desire for closeness. This thing is the opposite of closeness. I had an opportunity to be with my beloved. I told my beloved, go take a hike while I go have some fun. And at the moment I said it, it seemed to make sense. It seemed to be a good idea at the time. And then afterwards, whether it's immediately after or it's years after, I look back and I say, why did I do that? Why did I tell my beloved, go take a hike while I could go have a fleeting experience that has no value to me now? And it's not just the remorse, the regret. What a waste of time. It's more the pain of, and even if I'll spend every moment now with my beloved, I will never get back that squandered moment where we could have had a moment of closeness. And we'll always have as part of our story that I rejected my beloved. And it gets to me. It's hurting me. I don't want that. What can I do about it? There's nothing. How do I take it back? You understand? It happened. It's done already. It happened. I hate that moment of distance. So the fact that I hate it and wish it never existed is causing me now to have a greater intensity to want to be close to Hashem, so that if the irony is, if my wish were granted and you were, okay, fine, we'll take it out of your story, it never existed. But then I wouldn't have the intensity of desire to be close to Hashem that I have right now. Yeah.
What about for a person that feels that it's Hashem who created that distance?
Person feels that Hashem created the guilt,
Distance.
the distance.
The closeness by the things that Hashem created in his life.
Oh, that's different. That's different. That's different. You're talking about a person who feels. You're talking about when a person feels, where was God during this moment of when I was going through my hardest time and I felt that Hashem was hiding from me?
Yeah.
And he created that.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not talking about that right now. Look, this is like marriage therapy. Right now, we got to take one thing at a time. Okay? Right, sometimes we're going to talk about what he did. Sometimes we're going to talk about what she did. Right now, we're talking about clear instances where there's no question that the distance was my fault. I caused the distance. Now, you're raising a very good point. Sometimes I feel this distance in the relationship with Hashem, and I look at him like, hey, I wanted closeness. You didn't return my call. You didn't call me back. Okay, we'll talk about that later. Chapter 27. 26. 26. Yeah?
There is a concept though in halakha where Hashem sets up a separation to increase closeness, like in a couple, a Jewish couple. So can it be that Hashem pushes us away because he knows that it's going to trigger a deeper closeness?
Yeah, I mean, you're speaking. I'm not sure which you're saying this as a metaphor for closeness that we caused. I mean, distance that we caused, or distance that he caused.
But ultimately, it's all him.
Yeah, that's true too. Okay, let's not get too philosophical here. Okay, we're describing here what is actually a psychological phenomenon. It's not that mystical. It's not that hard to wrap your mind around. I had a negative experience, but the net effect of that negative experience is positive.
This is on a practical level.
On a practical level. Yeah. All right. K'maimorim Zal. Let's continue. Like the famous saying of our sages, B'makim shabali tshuva aimdim chulo, in the place where penitents stand, even the truly righteous cannot stand. What does that mean? That the intensity of desire, of longing for closeness that is caused by the past separation causes the Baal Tshuva to have a greater yearning for Hashem than if he had never had that separation in his story. And the tzaddikim don't have that. Val Tshuva mi'avar rabazu amra shezdein nasnasele kazachias. Regarding such a tshuva, we say that the past misdeeds become merits, not just that they're erased or canceled, but they become transformed, they become merits. Because they bring him to this intense love. So far, so good? Okay. Avol, however, tshuva shaloi mi'avazu, tshuva that is not coming from this kind of love, afshi tshuva nechaina, although it is proper tshuva, meaning it's perfectly acceptable tshuva, v'Hashem yislach loi, and Hashem will forgive him, meaning it is erased from the record. They're not going to bring it up in court anymore. It doesn't turn the sins into merits. It just erases them. It cancels them. And that negativity won't be retrieved from its place in klipot until the end of time, when Hashem gathers up all the irredeemable stuff that we were talking about before. That's how we started. We started by saying there's stuff that you can't clean up, you can't deal with. Hashem will deal with it at the end of time. So now we're back to that idea again. If it's regular tshuva, then okay, fine. So it's expunged from your record, move on. No one's going to hold it over your head. But as far as the negative, the spiritual loss that was entailed, the only one who could repair that is Hashem, and He'll do that when Mashiach comes. You just move on. Don't look back. We're done. Just move forward. All right. Now, in case you didn't have enough of this last week, this is more of the stuff that they skip in Beis Rivka.
We did teshuvah me'ava though in Bishop.
Right.
We did that part.
Right. Tell me if you did this part. The vitality that is in the seed, that is issued in vain. Although when the seed is issued in vain, so what happens to that chayas, to that vitality? It's a very powerful energy. I mean, it has the energy to give life, to create a baby, and now it's wasted. So that energy becomes captured within shalish klipos tameis.
Really?
Yeah, within the irredeemable klipos. But you could get it back just with regular teshuvah. You could redeem that energy. So the seed was wasted, and the energy becomes captive to the shalish klipos tameis. And the person who wasted the seed does teshuvah nechayna, just regular teshuvah. Regular teshuvah means, that's not good, I'm not going to do that anymore. Regular teshuvah.
Are you only referring here to like sins that were purposely done, or sins that were done by accident?
Want to get into the technicalities of
Not by accident.
what this is?
Like you sin out of ignorance, like you didn't know that you were sinning.
Ignorance of the law is not an excuse.
Oh, right.
Not an excuse.
No.
Say that. Just wanted to say that. There's another Bishop girl in the corner.
Okay. Everyone, without me being explicit, everyone understands that we're speaking about something that is a uniquely male biological phenomenon right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Specifically that sin. Right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Right now, yes. So he took this amazingly powerful spiritual energy that's in the seed, and he wasted it. So now that energy becomes relegated to the shalish klipos tameis. How do you get it out of there? Teshuvah. What kind of teshuvah? Regular teshuvah. Regular teshuvah is good enough. Also, intense kavana during Krishma Shalalamita. When you say bedtime shema, again, this is male stuff. This is
It's on the guys.
What? This is on the guys. Yeah, this is on the guys.
But why is it only on a man if a woman's participating in his?
They're not always participating.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
So this is
Oh,
where.
really?
So this is specifically where there was not a woman participating, and we'll speak about when there is a woman participating.
Maybe we should.
Well, we're going because it's in the text.
Who's in?
Yeah. It always astounds me, by the way, how people can get through the system. I'm saying in Chabad, where they learn Tanya, and not know how to deal with this aspect of the human experience, because it's dealt with so openly in Tanya. Yeah, yeah.
Because they don't teach it to us.
They skip it over, or they just go really fast. Okay, so a male wasted seed. That's a terrible misappropriation of spiritual potential. This energy is now being given over into the hands of the klipot. It's a terrible thing. Okay, how does he get it back out? After he realizes, shouldn't have done that. So the Alter Rebbe says, teshuvah nechayna. That means just, I wish I didn't do that. And he should have intense kavanah when he says the bedtime shema. The Arizal talks about it. Umaruma's the Gemara hints to it. Kol akere krishma al mitase ke'ilu eiches cherev shel shtei piyais chula. Anybody who says shema at the bedtime shema very intensely, it's like he's holding a double-edged sword to, get away the bad guys. You like that, Mike?
Yes.
Depiction of a sword. Okay, it's like my Dungeons and Dragons.
Hold the sword lower.
You hold it lower?
Yeah, you gotta hold the sword
I
lower.
don't know. What do I know?
It's not that impressive.
Okay, I have no idea here. Okay, lahare gufes chetzeinim, to kill the bodies. We're not talking about physical bodies here, but there's oir and kli, there's light and vessel, to kill the bodies of the chetzeinim, the extraneous forces. Shenasu levush lechayis shibetipus, that became a lavush that enclosed the vitality of this seed. Va'ila chayis mehem, and then the chayis, the vitality, is able to be released and to go up. Like those who know Kabbalah understand. V'lachin, therefore, here's an interesting concept. Where is the prohibition of wasting seed stated clearly in Torah? Clearly? Nowhere. Forbidden relationships are listed. Forbidden relationships are listed, but it doesn't specifically say the wasting of seed outside of a relationship with anybody else. So he says here, that's why wasting seed isn't mentioned along with the other prohibited relationships. You know why? Because it's in a different league. In certain ways, it's worse. In certain ways. Each one has an aspect which is more egregious than the other in different perspectives, which we'll speak about momentarily. Af shechamer mehan, wasting seed is actually worse in some ways, than engaging in a forbidden relationship. It's a greater sin in what respect? Bebechinas hagadlus v'ribuy atuma v'haklipos shemelid u'marba b'ma'ed v'haitzah zelavatala. Volume-wise, the amount of negative spiritual forces that are put out through wasting seed are greater than when engaging in forbidden relations. Yeser mebiyas asuris, more than forbidden relations. So you want to talk about quantitatively, what causes the greatest amount of spiritual pollution? Wasting seed. And that's why it's not even listed among them, because it's so much worse, quantitatively speaking.
Why? Because it gives the power to create.
Watch how he explains the difference, okay? Rak, however, forbidden relations adds vitality to a greater klipot, a worse klipot. That means qualitatively. Okay, what does that mean? That it's a qualitatively greater klipot. He explains, regular teshuvah can't pull it out. Can't retrieve that chayas. So here's the difference. You have the life force that is wasted through the emission of seed in vain. That actually causes quantitatively much more spiritual pollution. But qualitatively, it's not that hard to get it back. How do you get it back? You just realize, I don't want to do that anymore. I feel bad that I did it. I'm done. You say a good krishma shel alamita, and you can get that life force back. But when there's an actual forbidden relation, where you have two people who are forbidden for each other actually acting in an intimate way, now qualitatively it's worse. And how does that express itself? That regular teshuvah can't retrieve the vitality that's in the seed. Unless he does that level of teshuvah that we just described earlier, where it's the level where sins become merits. But regular teshuvah won't work. With wasting seed, regular teshuvah will work. With giving seed over to a forbidden partner, regular teshuvah doesn't work.
Was it teshuvah me'ava?
Teshuvah me'ava will work. Teshuvah me'ava will work because teshuvah me'ava can turn the negativity into positivity. So the person could say that relationship that he had, where that moment of acting that way separated him from Hashem, and now that separation from Hashem becomes the impetus to this constant yearning for closeness to Hashem. So then again, it's a net gain. What causes him to yearn for closeness with Hashem is that forbidden relation that he was involved in. And now he explains the mechanics of it. I don't think it's that difficult to grasp this, at least on one level. Why is it irretrievable, or so difficult? I shouldn't say irretrievable, but barring teshuvah me'ava, why is it so difficult to redeem that experience, even through regular teshuvah? He says, don't be scared by the Kabbalistic terms. Yesoid de nukva de klipa. Yesoid is the ninth sphera. Nukva is the feminine aspect. Klipa is klipa, negativity. So what happens? In forbidden relations, there's a spiritual entity called Yesoid de nukva de klipa. Yesoid just means the interface. It's how one thing sort of latches onto another thing. Yesoid is also called hischabrus, or connection. At any rate, when you have forbidden relations, so the seed was received and absorbed by, not just physically, but spiritually as well. There's two parallel things going on right now. There's a spiritual and a physical thing. So in forbidden relations, so the seed was received, absorbed by this, what we call Yesoid de nukva de klipa, hamakabelis v'keletes achayis megdusha, and it receives it and it absorbs it. And now you want to go get that vitality back, but the klipa is holding on to it. Not so when the seed was simply wasted. Because there's no spiritual recipient in that case. Again, you could understand this purely spiritually, or you could understand its physical parallel. I don't think it's that difficult to understand what he's describing here. If the seed was wasted in a way where there was no recipient, so in a certain way it's worse, the quantity, the volume of pollution, of spiritual pollution is greater. But qualitatively, it's not that hard to get it back. You just do regular teshuvah and good kavanah at Kaddish Mishal Alamita. If, however, it was forbidden relations, so actually volume-wise, quantity-wise, it's not as bad as wasting seed, but qualitatively, it's much more difficult to do anything about it after the fact, because there's a recipient that absorbed that energy, and now you can't just go and get it back.
Because Klippa doesn't want to give back what it has.
What?
Klippa's going to hold on to what
Klippa's not giving it back. That's right. That's right.
But now,
Klippa takes, it doesn't give.
In Zero Vatala,
So,
doesn't have the klippa's not so much holding on to it.
in Gzerel Vatala, the klippa didn't absorb it, it's hovering over it.
So it's easier to take it back.
Physically, the way, obviously we're using physical words to describe spiritual phenomena, but in Gzerel Vatala, the klippa's relationship with it is it's makif, it's hovering over it. When there's forbidden relations, then it's not hovering, it received it, it absorbed it. Yeah.
Is this why a mamzer cannot?
We're going to get to that.
Okay.
רק שכוחי וחייליסה מלבישים לחייס שבטיפס גידול לידי חן. Rather, what happens with Zera Levatola is it says that the powers and the forces of the klipot, they surround it. They're malbish, the chayas of the tippus. They're surrounding it as opposed to it being absorbed within them. And now we can understand the saying of our sages, what is a crooked thing that cannot be made straight? Somebody who has forbidden relations and they have offspring from the forbidden relations, because then even tshuva me'ava is not going to work anymore. Because you can't get the chayas back. Why not? Because that energy already became materialized as the body of this offspring. So when it was just in a completely spiritual state, it's sort of in flux, and you can deal with it through emotional rearrangements that happen inside of your heart. You felt this way about the experience, now you feel a completely different way about the experience. And that's sufficient to change the location of the energy, to take it back, to redeem it. But when the energy already materialized and became, the life force from this seed became this child, how are you going to get it back? So then it makes it a little bit more difficult, to say the least. Okay. Anyhow, is this stuff
It's a tough class.
understood? Yeah, it's tough. Yeah.
I can remember learning this in detail last time.
No, we didn't learn it in detail last
No.
time. No. Now, I said at the beginning of class, last time we went through the Tanya, we did 7 and 8 in one class.
Oh, I see.
And in
That's
this
why I
time,
remember this.
we took 3 classes just to do chapter 7.
Well, look at this class.
Look at this class, yeah. Anything else about this? Yeah?
So it's completely irredeemable at this point. There's nothing you could do to redeem that. Like, it's not like.
They never say never, but I don't know if I want to get into the...
The improper relationships, not the seed in the vein.
Right, yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah. Anything else? We're good for now?
But only if it
I don't know how
if it
good we
bears